I want to get right into it. Chapter 3 is called Structure. Again, I'll just say it one more time. And it's like, I went to rehab, I left, I was there for 4 months, welcome back. Well, I was there for 4 months, then I lived in the Poconos and I went to a halfway house. And I can't help but think, like, my path is a little bit like everyone's path here. Like, this is hopefully a transitional living, and hopefully I just want to share my experience with you all. So I'm going to just read my experience, and then I want to hear from you guys. Okay? Chapter 3, I call it Step 3, Structure. In the Poconos, I began to have smart feet. Smart feet is an expression in Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's say you don't feel like going to a meeting, you're tired or your stomach hurts. Regardless of how you feel, you have smart feet. So you put on your shoes and you walk to the meeting, or you walk to your car and you drive to the meeting. Your feet take you there because you know what you need to be doing next. I'm applying that kind of principle here. Despite what I was actually doing, the overall theme is that I was doing the next right thing. I think that's been true in every chapter of my life, except when I first got hooked on alcohol and drugs. An easier way to understand smart feet is when you move in the right direction more unconsciously than consciously. I wanted my smart feet to continue, but I had my fill of the mountains by then, and I wanted to move back to the city. When one of my roommates left to return home, another roommate I found a new apartment at Pocono Pines. That's in the Poconos. It was a well-known place because it was 5 minutes from Pocono Raceway, where they hold the annual NASCAR event. The area population multiplies by 20 times during NASCAR week. I was going to school more and I was doing the same things, but I was getting a little squirrely about living in fairly a rural area. And as the old joke goes, Pennsylvania is Philadelphia and Pittsburgh with Alabama in between. The more stuff I had and the more life was returning back to normal, the more I realized I wanted and needed a better future. After all, I had a year sober. Around this time, my dad found out that Rutgers had a program for students in recovery. As part of their acute psychiatric services, APS, it was actually through the alcohol and other drug assistance program, ADAP. If you got into the program would help you get into Rutgers. I wasn't sure if I could get into Rutgers on my own. My Indiana transcript was not exactly stellar, so I applied and went through the interview process. It was kind of a backdoor into a big university, except you got put in a sober dorm with everybody at Rutgers. The program had a great supportive vibe, and it was so important for my recovery. My friends at Rutgers were going through the same thing. I was there, and one of the alumni of the program who also offered advice and support. I went to AA meetings again, but the program didn't require it. You only had to be in recovery. There were all types of addicts in the program. There were people like me who got addicted young, went to rehab and got sober. There were students already at Rutgers who got into trouble with alcohol and drugs, and they were advised to move into this dorm until they got straight. I remember one woman in particular who had gotten into trouble with drugs and alcohol, and this was the way she wanted to go to college, in a dorm where you had to be sober. That was basically the only requirement, but you had to check in with someone from Rutgers once a semester or so, nothing major. I was staying clean, but I was still coasting by in my recovery program and with the 12 steps. This meant that I wasn't building my sobriety. If there was such thing as sobriety muscle memory, I was not strengthening my muscles. The summer after my first year at Rutgers, I signed up for Birthright. It was a free trip to Israel. I was halfway around the world in the Middle East, and on the third or fourth night, I'm in a hotel room with some guys who were drinking. They asked me if I wanted some, and although I was trying to be sober, I had no defense. Less than a week into my trip, and I relapsed. My head, however, was so messed up that no one would know. None of my recovery friends were on the trip. Once I lied to myself the first time. Doing so again was easy. I proceeded to drink throughout the trip. One of the sayings in AA is that when you're inside the meeting, your disease is doing push-ups in the parking lot. Your addiction is like those comic book supervillains. It's always trying to get stronger, to absorb your power, to fight it. Thank you. Appreciate that. To fight it and make your strength its strength. Once I started drinking again, it was as I've never stopped. I remember soon thereafter walking across the street from our hotel, buying beer at 11 o'clock in the morning and drinking alone. That's what it's like to be an addict. I just picked up right where I left off. It's not like I had one sip during my relapse. I got drunk, I woke up, and started drinking again. That's also how I use drugs. Mentally, I understand that I cannot ingest any substance that affect me from the neck up ever again, with the exception of nicotine, caffeine, and sugar. That's sort of a recovery joke, because nicotine, caffeine, and sugar are about the most addictive substances on the planet, and they are doing so much damage to people. But because they're so widely accepted and so prevalent in everything, nicotine, caffeine, and sugar aren't viewed the same as cocaine and liquor. They're a different type of addiction. I wasn't stealing for a pack of cigarettes or writing bad checks for Starbucks for a latte. Digestion aside, my point is that when I stopped taking my recovery seriously 24/7, it came back to bite me. In Israel, I did not have a defense against the first drink, and when I was in a situation that there was peer pressure to party, my disease overwhelmed my willpower. I got back to New Jersey and I started attending AA meetings again, but continued to relapse and lie about my drug use. When I returned from Birthright, I remember lying to a psychiatrist that my parents had sent me to, and I got medicine for ADD. I knew what to say to the psychiatrist to get medicine. Of course, I started abusing the pills. I would do something crazy like take 2 pills every hour or 2 until I finished the whole bottle. And I would be up for 2 or 3 days. It felt like I was on coke again. I remember being around my family high off the pills and being in the sober dorm with people asking if there was something wrong with me. They knew I was different. They knew I was staying up all night. I was a couple hours removed from finishing a pill bottle, and I was hanging around my sober friends at Rutgers, and we were playing board games. I was on a bender having not slept in a day or 2, and I was so tired I took a nap in a friend's apartment. It was around 7 p.m. I was telling them how I was tired, how tired I was because I was working so hard, but it wasn't that. It was the speed, and I napped. I remember napping during the closing ceremony of the 2008 Beijing Olympics. David Beckham was on a double-decker bus at the closing ceremony because the next Olympics in 2012 were in London. It was Sunday, August 24, 2008. I remember it clearly because that day was the last time I used. August 25, 2008 is my sobriety day. I haven't used drugs since that horrible relapse and lying about it to my family and sober friends. Sobriety got me back on track at Rutgers. I got great grades majoring in communications, and for my last semester, I was able to take a semester abroad in Florence, Italy. I wanted to go to London because having never been to Europe, I wanted an English-speaking program, but I settled on Florence, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I hope everyone gets a chance to settle on something so great. Finishing my college education, studying abroad in Italy, was a gift of my sobriety. I smiled just thinking about it. It was just so great being in Italy by the Ponte Vecchio. I found an English-speaking AA meeting there, and I point this out because I was alone, no one knew me. That meeting was the first time I told anyone I had relapsed and had lied about it. It took Florence for me to have a moment of honesty. Italy saved my ass. Grazie mille, which is Italian for thank you. Before I left for Italy, I met a girl named Melanie who had lived in a recovery house at Rutgers and was living on her own in the area. Melanie was involved in public relations, and another sober guy, Ted, had gotten her an internship at this PR firm in New York City. It was really cool. She introduced me to Ted, and Ted helped get me an internship at that same firm. So the summer before I went to Italy, I was interning in New York City and living at Rutgers. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life other than stay sober, which I had been achieving with only intermittent success, but Melanie's job seemed fun and interesting. So I took 2 public relations courses at college. Melanie showed me it could be done. You know how different groups are always discussing the need for representation and how it's important to see who looks like you do something you may want to do? It's important with drug addicts also. Seeing addicts successful in their jobs and and lives gives you hope, and hope is very important. The internship was sort of my transition in New York City and an example that recovery in life isn't a straight line of success. I had relapse, I had lied to family, my sober friends, and my psychiatrist, but I kept moving forward. I had made progress at Cairn, then with Scotty in the Poconos, then living with roommates in the Poconos, then Rutgers, then Italy, and now, hopefully, New York. Through hard work and luck, I overcame missteps, and my smart feet kept leading me to a better future. My parents, okay, so before I finish this, my writer, I had a ghostwriter, interviewed my parents. So there's parts of the book where you hear from my parents' perspective about my use. My parents. My dad said he really started to notice a change in me when I got to the Rutgers program. Karen and Scotty got me sober and taught me sobriety, but the Rutgers program helped set me up for my career as a sober person. Mom. We wanted him to finish college so badly, and Rutgers was a great program that got through to him. Dad. To get into the program, Mitchell kept sending Rutgers information, and they had to get a transcript from Indiana where he had very poor grade point average. I got to meet a Rutgers counselor, and I told her for some reason that my son wanted to get in because of the addiction program. And she said to me, Larry, I'm so upset. My brother is also an addict, and I can't get him to stop. I told her that I may be violating my son's rules, his privacy, but I gave her Mitchell's cell phone number. There's some magic when one addict talks to another, I told her. I don't care if you're violating, he doesn't care if you're violating, but you call him and have your brother call my son. We were both crying, and then about a week later he got accepted. My advice, structure for someone in substance abuse recovery is priceless. Structure leads to discipline. You don't have to be perfect, but if you have structure and discipline, you can fail, get down, and get up, and get right back on track. My structure and discipline were the big reason I got back on track after my relapses and helped me tremendously. So that's it from chapter